All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Shirt Lab workshop. Screens are equipment. And this is with my good friend, Alan Howe with Easy Way. How are you doing today, Alan?
I'm doing great. Having a great day.
Great.
So busy after Long Beach, the Long Beach show, but yeah, great day.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us today. We've got 30-something people signed up, so it's going to be interesting of how many people actually attend. Usually it's about half. So I know a lot of people are just jumping in right now. So thank you so much for attending and being on time. And we're not going to wait. We're just going to get started here. So with that, we want to first, if you're not a member of Shirt Lab Tribe, we would love to have you sign up. So Shirt Lab Tribe is a mastermind group that's composed of shop owners and production managers and influencers and suppliers, and we're all about helping you grow your business. This is a place that's safe to ask those newbie questions and stuff because we're all about helping you get better. We have a live Q&A every single Tuesday at 5 o'clock Eastern. That's super popular. Everything we do is recorded, and so we would love to have you on there. We have a platform where you can ask questions and lots of videos and stuff that you can watch. So you can sign up at shirtlabtribe.com. It's $97 a month, and that fee goes for every single person in your shop, which makes it really an affordable place to find education. So please check it out. And with us today, of course, is Alan with his decapitated head photo that he likes to use.
Yeah.
And,
I had a new one taken at Long Beach.
Oh, great. We don't have that one yet. So in the meantime,
that's quite a few years ago. So I wish I looked that good right now. But,
yeah. And then, well, you're like me. You got a face for radio. And so if either one of you want to reach out, and here's our email addresses: ahow@easyway.com, and of course Marshall at marshallatkinson.com. Happy to help you guys with anything. And Alan, if somebody has a question, they send you an email, you'll answer it, right?
Right away, if possible.
Right.
Guaranteed within 24 hours. And I'm one of those at the end, you'll have my phone number and text me and do whatever. Right.
Also, we can't do this or any other thing that we do without sponsors. And of course, Easy Way is a really great sponsor for us. And they were one of the first companies to sign on and help us out back when we started in 2018. So we really appreciate them. And so please, if you do business with any of these companies, please thank them for their participation and help in making Shirt Lab happen. And with that, here we go. So Alan wants, if you've got a question in the middle, just type it in and I will read it to him. And otherwise, we can hang out after the presentation to take questions. So with that, Alan, take it away.
Great. Well, I'm glad everybody's coming. And while, this is a very subject that is near and dear to my heart in the print process, because I have watched for almost 40 years of doing this, of seeing screens be treated like commodities, that it's just something you purchase with ink and squeegees and stuff like that. And I hate that, because screens are equipment. They are the foundation of the print process. There is nothing that happens without screens. And Marshall, I think, and Marshall's running the PowerPoint for me. So we're going to cover a lot about this. Here are the things. It's called screen printing for a reason. Screen in the word. Think about that. We're going to talk about screen tension. It's everything. If there's nothing else you learn today, I want you to learn the importance of screen tension and how it affects everything else. We're going to talk about the print process, of how your screen affects it and could negatively affect it, and how some of your stencil encoding exposure or reclaim problems Could be because of your frame. And we want to blame the emulsion. We want to blame the coater. We want to blame the chemical. And it just might be because of your screen. And these all build on each other. It's called screen printing. And for me, screen printing isn't a decoration. It is a decoration method because we're actually embellishing something on a garment. But screen printing is different because it's a process. And anytime it's a manufacturing process. And as manufacturers, when you do one thing well, it affects the next thing. You do one thing in that process wrong, you're going to have negative effects all the way down the line. And this is why screens are equipment, because it's called screen printing, not squeegee printing, not press printing, not dryer printing, not CTS, screen printing. And your screens are equipment. They affect everything else. So it's a manufacturing, not decorating. And the failure to control each step of this process affects and hinders the next process, as we talked about. And this equals time and loss of profit. And if you're a nonprofit organization, fine, but it still affects your time. And all processes have to be controlled. And that's what it's about. If you can't measure it, you cannot control it. There is no guessing in baseball. There's no crying, or there's no crying in baseball. There's no guessing in screen printing. You can't measure it. You can't control it. Controlled is repeatable. And we're going to show you how to control it. And these are not going to be expensive. It's not buying a ton of equipment, but these are things you can put in the process right away. The other thing I want you to remember is that Plastisol ink, which is most ink everybody's using, is to be sheared, not pushed. And we will touch on this later, but remember that phrase. Plastisol ink is to be sheared, not pushed. And just remember that. So, first thing, nothing happens without screens. We were just at a trade show, a huge one, and there was everything. There were printers, there were dryers, there were direct screens, there were lasers, and all these are great. They cost a lot of money. They have bells and they go around and prints come off and everything like that, except they are useless without screens. $1 million worth of the best printers and dryers do not run without screens. So my question is, are you taking care of your equipment? So think about that. Are you taking care of your equipment, and how are you taking care of it? Does it look like this? A wood frame, which was common when I started and still are, but there's some issues with that, with wood, and we'll talk about that. Or maybe you're using an aluminum frame like this. If your frames, after being printing, look like this is a problem. This is not taking care of your equipment. So these screens are equipment. Take care of them, treat them well, and they'll make you money. Ignore them like this, they will frustrate you, and that sucking sound you hear will be profit down the road, down the drain.
Can you elaborate a little bit, Alan, about what you mean about taking care of it? Because I go to shops all the time, and screens like this, full of ink and tape and gunk, is super common.
Yeah.
And always gives me the willies, and we always have a chat, but I think it's all too common, and I want people to understand why this is an issue.
Most people think leaving ink in the screen is okay because Plastisol doesn't dry until it hits 320, 330 degrees. Excuse me. But this is not good, because what we forget is Plastisol also builds up, it sticks to tropic. There are plasticizers in it, and they can leach out. And this is not good, good practice. One, because this is a piece of equipment. And when ink's in that screen, you're having to burn another one. You're having to buy another one. And it's like going, well, I have a job on an 8-color manual press. I'm just going to keep 3 heads, full of screens without using them altogether. Why would you do that? That's $60 of frames that can be, or more than almost $70 in frames that could be used and reused if they're done well. Just not good practice on it. And then because it's so messy, if you look, there's tape on the aluminum frame at the bottom. This is what it needs to look like. This is a roller frame, the second one. Wood frames, I'm not a big fan anymore because usually they're cheaper, they warp. And then when we talk about tension, just like aluminum frames, not all the same, they can bow in and really affect your tension. Aluminum frames, if they're not from a good supplier, the walls are thick, the aluminum is cheap, and they destroy and they warp. So this is a roller frame. We'll talk about them. It's retensionable. This is the highest end frame. I'm a big fan of controlling tension, and we'll see why. And the reason is screen tension is everything. Everything. My theory, and I'm going to go Alan Howe theory, but I have a lot of people like Richard Greaves who are smarter than me that will agree. I believe 85 to 90% of most print problems can be cured with proper tension. Everything builds on this. This is the first part of the screen printing process. And that's your screen. And it's about mesh. In the tightness of the mesh, we think tension is how tight the screen is. But tension of the mesh is measured in newtons. And it's measuring the amount of force it takes to flex the mesh, not how tight it is. And this is the first stop. It can only be measured with a tension meter, not with your hands, not with your fingers. You just can't tell by using the force. Many people say,
hold on. You mean you can't thump it like a watermelon and tell that it's a good screen? I see that all the time.
Yeah, I see it all the time too, and it's wrong because you cannot calibrate your fingers every day. And it is impossible to tell. Remember, if you can't measure it, you can't control it. Tension needs to be a consistent plus or minus 2 Newton centimeters across the image area, both directions. There are long threads in the mesh called the warp threads and short threads called the weft threads. Warps go long, up and down, weft goes left to right. And that's stupid, but that's how we remember them. And the tension meter measures both ways. They need to be plus or minus 2 Newton centimeters away from each consistent around there in the image area. So this needs to be consistent for one, to screen on press for color consistency. If you have different tensions from screen to screen, you have a 30 Newton on head 1, you have a 20 Newton on head 2, you have a 15 Newton on head 3, you're going to be making so many adjustments. Your color consistency is going to be all over the place. It's just not smart. So tension is everything for custom screen. What's that?
Not to mention you're going to have some registration problems.
Incredible registration, and we will hit on that also. So everything builds on that. You can only check your tension with a Newton meter. And this is one right now. This one is by Stretch Devices, which is one of the best ones. And just so everybody knows, I work for EasyWay. I have no skin on what frame, what mesh, what Newton meter you use. I'm just a big fan of tools. Newton meters are a tool. They cost anywhere from about $400 to $500. Every shop needs to have one and know how to use it and use it consistently. Many people have one and there's dust on the case. Don't do that. Doesn't work by osmosis. So screen tension. Mesh is tension to resist the squeegee. Remember, your screen tension isn't about how tight the screen is. It's about how much it takes to flex the screen. And so how much mesh is tension to resist the squeegee? That's what it's reading. 50 newtons, it takes more to flex 50 newtons screen than it does a 20. Here's why this is important. Next slide, Marshall. There we go. So screens are equipment. There are a couple of them. Retentionable, which is like a Newman roller frame, which are the highest, most consistent tensions, and it is the only way you're able to retension a frame. All mesh will lose tension over time. It will start relaxing, and roller frames are the only way you're able to bring it back up. The mesh will work harden over time, and that means it will stabilize at a tension and it will stay there longer and actually last longer. Now, these are equipment, as all screens are. And on retentionables, while I'm a huge fan, you have to buy into them. They cost more, they last longer, and they give you control over the uncontrollable, which is relaxing mesh. Static stretch and glue, the mesh has to be removed and restretched. And now, on a positive note, static frames have come, which are like your aluminum frames, they have come a long way. And a quality restretcher or manufacturer will have consistent tension. The only difference is that your mesh relaxes and you have to send it to have it restretched. And that's a cost to it over time. There's no way to bring it back up. You have to monitor the tension of the frames when they arrive and after every reclaim, meaning you have to know what is your tension you can expect with your mesh counts from your screen supplier. If you're going for 28 newtons on a 110 aluminum, you need to tell your mesh supplier, what can I reasonably expect? Because you're going to be measuring with a tension meter to find out what the tensions are, and you're going to mark that on the frame. And then every time, excuse me, because then every time after you reclaim before you coat, you're going to measure again. And if that tension is dropped from 28 to 26, then you're going to know. Because remember, you don't want a 26 Newton on head 1 and an 18 Newton on head 3, because you're going to have a lot of issues. It's about consistency and controllable. Take control of this area. Screens are equipment. And this is not hard to do. And the reason it's equipment, and this is important, and here's why. Your tension affects everything in printing. Everything that you might think is it's mesh, my frames, or it's mesh, or it's the stupid press, or my printer, or the artwork, 1,000 things. It's probably your screen tension. Poor tension is the cause of misregistration, halo images, mesh marks, and frosting peaks. These are common problems I see every day. Misregistration, we've all seen that. It lines up, I did my test print, and now I start printing, and head 3 starts double stroking, or it's misregistering, or it's the haloed image. And we sit there and go, oh my gosh, that head in this press will not hold registration. And you go to the Long Beach show and you go to the manufacturer of the press, that automatic you paid $1 zillion for, 3 years ago, and you said, my press is not holding registration because of this. I think I need a new one. And your equipment salesman says, yes, you do. Where what might be happening is your mesh is moving and it's causing it to misregister. Mesh marks, or frosting peaks, I call them, where you cannot get the ink to lay down and it looks like the cake frosting there, especially on white ink, especially on golds. And you're going, I need new ink. Where no, it might be your mesh picking up from poor tension. These are common problems that go away with proper tension and controlled tension.
And it can also be like a pebbly look too, like it's like little bumps instead of like sharp peaks.
That's mesh marks. Yes. I just didn't have a good picture of that. So mesh roll, this is the cause of misregistration and haloing, or, that double print at the top. You look on the left side, your squeegee's moving left to right. On here, you can see the screen. We want high tension where the screen actually snaps and comes off the substrate right after the squeegee, which it's doing. But look at that roll underneath the ink of the mesh rolling. And that is what is happening. Your image is moving under the ink. We can't see it on a manual or automatic happening because it's under the ink. Now, Marshall, can they see me in the thumbnail?
Maybe.
Okay. If you can see me, hold out, and you want to see it, hold out your hand. And if you do, hold out your hand, palm down, take your finger and move it on the skin. And you can see the skin moving in one direction as your finger. That's like the squeegee. But if you close your hand, not even tight, you can see the tightness, and that is mesh roll. And that is the most common problem that people cannot see that's causing misregistration. I think more presses have been sold because of this problem than just correcting the problem.
So Richard says they could see your hand, but you didn't hold it high enough. And Josh, we are going to be sharing this presentation on YouTube, and anybody who's signed up, I'll be sending them the link. So you'll be able to get the presentation and the video. So yes.
Would that Richard be Richard Greaves?
It would be, yes.
Who has stolen this idea from me that I've showed many times from people?
I think you stole it from him.
Okay, that might be it. I get it confused. So I did learn this from Richard Greaves, who learned it from Mr. Don Newman. So anyways, here it is. Your hand flat, finger on it, and you can see the skin moving. Richard, can we see that?
Yes.
Okay, close it, and now it's tight. There's mesh roll. That's your mesh.
And that's because your skin is under tension. That's
exactly.
Yeah.
You don't have to make a tight fist, just close it.
Yeah.
So we're not talking high tension like 50 newtons. We're talking just consistent high 20 newtons. And these go away.
Mm-hmm.
If you've had that problem, could be that tension affects everything. It affects your squeegee on how that prints. Here's why. Now remember, plastisol is sheared, not pushed. Shearing is cutting. That's why the scissors. So when I was younger, my grandmother and mom, while I was raised in Detroit, my grandmother and mom are from Alabama, and grandma used to cut my hair when I was younger, and she would say, don't get the scissors, get me the shears. Shears are cutting. Now, the big joke is that the shears were also called, or the curtains were called shears, which confused me to death as a kid, but still, scissors were shears. And so plastisol is sheared, it's not pushed. Ink shears then flows when it is moved. So your squeegee is acting like one part of the screen. It is moving and flowing through and cutting that ink through, making contact. Pressure has nothing to do with moving the shearing ink. Now you want pressure to flex that screen, but just that amount. And pressure brings the mesh into momentary contact with the shirt as the squeegee passes over it, and then releases, as we saw, not smashed through the screen. When you have low tension, you're going to have to use more squeegee pressure, either manually or on your press, more off contact, which is a problem also, and more squeegee strokes, which is time and ink used. And it'll also affect your opacity. And we can show that too.
So this is really super important, because how many shops have you been to, Alan, where they double stroke the underbase for white ink on a black shirt?
Yep.
And it's
And that's
because they're not, their whole thinking about screens is upside down, don't you think?
agreed, 100%, Marshall. And how about this? Everybody has printed that white ink job, that one color white on black, where it should be easy, but sometimes white on black is the hardest thing to do, because you work and work to get that print. And then when you do, going, okay, that print looks good. And then you see that print is just as good on the inside of the shirt or on the palette. Your tension is so bad, you're having to use more pressure, and that ink is being driven into the garment and through the garment, where you're having to build up more and more ink to get opacity. And you're hitting it too many times and you're wasting ink. And that's all money. That is your profit, because you're not taking care of your equipment. The very piece that you have, that small piece of equipment that costs $27 in an $80,000 press, is costing you money. More off contact. When we say more off contact or more pressure, neither. Fix your tension. If you look at the top left picture, when you have more off contact that's raised, your squeegee pressure goes down, and you can see you can also distort your image, as you see as it's going there, and you can have alignment problems. If you look with more pressure at the other picture, you can see that squeegee doubled over. That's smashing and smashing the ink, not shearing it. You want your squeegee like the first picture. You want that edge of your squeegee. We live life on the edge on screen printing. Your edge of your squeegee driving that ink, shearing it, not doubled over in the other picture, smashing it. And when you have to use more pressure to make that off contact, that higher off contact, reach your garment, you're going to bend over your squeegee, and you're going to just create more and more problems. Too much pressure bends the blades and pushes ink, not shearing it. That causes rough prints, mesh marks, and drives the ink through the fabric. So you have less opacity. So you're going to this show, and a zillion people said, I'm looking for a better white ink. And you just know Wilflex and International Coating and Rutland, they have that magic white, because you see these prints going, I can't print that. And you want to open that white ink, I need a better one. And you want it to open, and it goes, ah, and just prints great, where it's actually your tension.
So Richard wrote, I sell that blade demonstration device for $400.
So in the photo credit, you'll see Richard's name. That is Richard Greaves' hand on there. So yes, it is a common device. Too much off contact causes registration and image distortion. Here's a bigger picture of that. And you can see at the edge there, when you first press down, it's distorting the image instead of going straight down. Now here's a picture of proper off contact. Look at the top. You can see the squeegees moving, and then right in front of the squeegee, after it's passed, there's your ink lay down, nice and crisp. No mesh roll behind it under the ink roll. This is another peripheral view, and you can see your squeegee is making contact all the way across consistently because of consistent tension all the way through right there in the corners. That's what you're looking for. And this affects your squeegee because of tension. Proper consistent tension will increase your productivity and your profits. It will let you go faster print speeds because you're shearing, not pushing. It will give you faster registration because you're not messing with micros. There's no mesh movement or roll. Less fatigue when manual printing because you're shearing it, not pushing. And Vastec has a great video on there that Doug Greiger did when he was in the industry, showing the way to hold a squeegee manually and how to just use your body weight to go with it. You have to use some pressure, but just to flex the mesh. Higher tension makes easier printing. You get better ink yield. That's more prints per gallon of ink with higher tension because you're not double stroking. You're not driving it through the fabric. And you can go through higher mesh counts to get the opacity. Better opacity with finer mesh counts, less ink. Because you're shearing that ink, you can go through a 155 instead of a 110, a 125 instead of a 110. Every pro knows this and does it every day. The top printers, and I've done a seminar called 5 Fundamentals, where the top printers, the Lon Winners, the Andy Andersons, the Anthony Sharples, they all control their tension. And they don't worry about one color whites on blacks anymore. It's just about printing fast, printing quality, and getting the best profit. Part of their process, and it's profitable. Screen coating. Your tension can affect your screen coating also. You have to have in your screen proper stencil and coating. Now, something I don't say in this, when you are coating with a poor tension screen, you can see in the coat, you ever see where you've coated it looks good, but it looks way darker in the middle? It's because your screen's bagging and there's less tension on it, and you're getting more emulsion in the middle than you are on the edge. Think about that, because when we talk about exposing, how do you know what consistent exposure is? So proper stencil and coating. It has nothing to do in screens, has nothing to do with how many coats. Everybody says, you know what? Well, I coat 1 and 1. I coat 2 and 3. I don't care. Most printers have no idea why they coat the way they do, or what they should do, or what they should look for. So here's what you need to look for. It's about one thing: emulsion over mesh. EOM, it's called. You've heard us say that in seminars. You got to have good EOM. So you're looking at the 2 pictures, one on the left, one on the right. Which one would you want to print with? Everybody says all the way 100%, one on the left. Or I'm sorry, one on the right. The one on the left has 1% EOM. EOM means emulsion over mesh, the percentage of emulsion over the thickness of the mesh. You want between 10 to 20% EOM. And you can see how sharp that image is. It gives you a nice gasket and how easy that is to print with. That's what you're looking for. Next slide. Why is this important? So your stencil controls the image shape. Everybody thinks it controls ink deposit. That's only true for the most part when you're doing a high density print or a silicone print. So here's how it affects your everyday printing. You can see the ink flow, and you can see at the sides in the purple where it has your emulsion over the mesh. The thickness of the mesh at the edge of the round circles there, you can see it's there. It's about 10%. When your ink flows past that, you can see the ink deposit. It's square. It's right there like it's supposed to be. As opposed to the next one, where it's controlled, where you have poor EOM, like 1% we saw. And here's what happened. The shape and details being caused by the mesh, which is not what you want. You can see the ink deposit, square and flat on top, feathered out on the sides. Why do some of your lines, especially on white inks with black, why aren't they feathered out on the side? Might be you have poor EOM. You don't have enough emulsion. Proper thickness can only really be controlled or can be measured with a thickness gauge. Basically, you can get them from Kiwo, Yolano, Promline has them. You can get a thickness gauge made for screen printing, not for other things, because sometimes the barbs on them will affect your stencil. But what it does is you take a reading of the open mesh to get the thickness. You take a reading of your stencil thickness, and then the difference is your percentage of what it is.
How much are those, Alan?
Those can actually range up into the $900, $600 to $1,000. Not as much as a press, and will definitely save you lots of money. Now, if you're not sure in a textile shop, if you have proper EOM, and I happen to be in your shop or someone does, and I'm a screen printing geek, I do that, and you're showing me your shop, you're telling me you're having a problem with prints, and you see me reach over and just feel the underside of your screen, it's not a weird screen printing thing. What I'm doing, if I put my finger on the image area, I want to see, can I feel the lip of that stencil? Especially on those lower mesh counts. I want to be able to feel that. If you can't feel it, you probably don't have enough stencil.
You should be able to pick at it like it's a piece of masking tape.
A little bit. Yep, exactly. I don't do it with my fingernail, do it with the edge of my finger. So a word on coating. Most printers don't have enough stencil thickness. They don't know what EOM is. They don't know how to check for it. And they don't know why they're coating the way they are. That's not your own fault. Because as our friend Greg Kitson always said, we just don't know what we don't know. And you know what? Unfortunately, in our industry, we learn tribally. You know, I bought a shop from Marshall. He taught me what he was doing. He bought it from someone else who taught him how to coat. He taught me the same way. Well, what if that guy Marshall bought it from was a psychopath? Had no idea what he was doing. And now it's just been passed on. So we learn tribally. So most people on the coater are not even sure that there's a round or sharp edge. What should you use? So, you know, check your coater. So here's why. You always want to use the round edge, because a round edge will put on more emulsion. It will actually coat it faster, while the sharp edge just scrapes emulsion on. If you look on the image on the left, you can see what 3 passes of emulsion will do. It's filling it all in. While on the right, it's just scraping it on the front and filling it on one side. You can flip the screen and coat the other side, but you're not going to get good emulsion penetration all the way through on the mesh. And it's going to look like that 1% EOM. Here's another picture I got from Mr. Richard Greaves. And I would encourage everybody to do this. Take a small scoop coater and start coating. If you look, one side says sharp, one side says round. Up on the frame are how many passes it was. And what it is on the masking tape there is the microns of how thick it was. First pass, look at it. It's the same, 1, 1, 2, 2 on thickness. But look at the round edge. See how dark it is? Because it's filling in all the way through. Look all the way on the sharp edge. No matter all the way up to 5 passes, 5 coats, never gets any higher than 2. You're not coating, you're scraping. Don't scrape your emulsion. This is a simple thing you can do with your emulsion in your frames. Now, if you have poor tension, your tension is going to be different all the way up and down that. You're going to get some pretty uneven readings.
I'm curious at how many people, but obviously besides Richard Greaves, because this is his slide, have actually done this in their shop and have that sitting there as an example for their crew.
Yeah.
Comment if you've done that. I'm just curious.
Yep, absolutely. So there's a way you can coat. You can coat 1-on-1, and 1-on-1 is fine if that's what you're supposed to be doing and need to do. The caveat is different emulsions have different solids and different thicknesses. Don't confuse solids with thickness of emulsion. That can be adjusted in the emulsion manufacturing process. So just if you don't know my background, I am not just a chemical guy. I have worked for major distributors and I have worked for an emulsion and mesh manufacturer. So, all emulsions are different. Don't think what works for you is going to work for another guy, and don't give that advice. Do your own testing. There is a method called the glisten or shine mesh method for coating screens, which I love, because that way it takes the guesswork out of it, because there's no experts in this. You know what? We can give opinions, but you got to do the test yourself. This takes opinions away. It's not what Marshall said. It's not what Alan said. It's not what Richard Greaves said. It's not what this rep said or this guy or this guy. This gives you consistent EOM, and it's called the glisten or shine method of coating. First, you fill the holes. But you want to start with the round edge of your scoop coater and start on the print side. That is the side where that meets the shirt. And you want to coat until the squeegee side glistens. That can be one coat, it can be two coats, until that emulsion starts coming through. And only when it starts coming through, you go to the second side, you go to the squeegee side, and you do one or two coats. And depending on your emulsion, sometimes you can just do one coat. And what you do is you're pushing that back through, filling all the mesh openings. And by doing it that way, is you're pushing the emulsion all the way through, and then you're getting perfect EOM because you're printing it, you're drying it with the screen print side down. I always forget to say this. I just assume everybody knows your print side has to be down when drying, horizontally down. And then you're going to have perfect EOM, whether it's a 125, a 110, a 305, a 280, no matter what. And there's no guessing. The glisten or shine method. Now, anytime you do something like this with your screens, you are going to want to do an exposure test, and that'll take us an exposure because your times can change. And that's screen exposure. And that brings us to this. Now, remember, review. Screen, these are equipment. That print you make, that machine you just bought at the show, that new M&R, that new Anatol, that new Rock, that new MHM, I don't care what you paid for it, does not work without screens. Crappy screens still equal crappy profits, crappy production, crappy prints, and lots of time to not make it crappy.
And who wants crappy?
I don't know. Lots of people, obviously, because I see it out there, but they just don't know what they don't know. So let's talk about proper exposing and developing. Now, with tension, you have poor tension, you're going to have poor coating. And when you have poor coating, you're going to have poor exposure and you have poor prints. See how that builds? Screens are equipment. Proper exposing and developing. Your goal is not how fast you can expose the screen or cure the stencil. It is about getting a total cure, a total exposed screen. And that starts with properly dried screens. Water is the main component of all stencils, all liquid emulsions, and even capillary film, just not as much. But water evaporation is the most important. And again, you can't just go, well, I let it go 24 hours. You have to measure it. Now, we've saw stencils where you're going, I use XYZ amount from Saudi, or I use it from Chromaline, or Yolano, or Kiwo, or Murakami, whoever. And it says, well, mine's 46% solids, mine's 28%, mine's 30%. What we don't know is we don't know what solids mean. Here's what that means. 45% solids means there's 55% water in it. And that means over half has to come out and dry before that stencil will set up and cure properly. 45% solids is 55% water. If you're using a dual cure and it's 30%, it's a lot more. So you got to make sure your screens are dry. And that's all by environment. When you have a screen room, you want to take what is called a hygrometer And all it does is measure the relative humidity. You might have a humidifier in there and it measures it, but it's measuring it right where it comes into the dehumidifier. Don't go by that. Get this, they're $30, get them on Amazon, go to Lowe's or Menards and get one and put it in your screen drying room, whether it's a closet or whatever. Just don't put it against the an outside wall, but set it higher up so it's measuring the relative humidity. You have to measure it. Because when people say, so what's your humidity level, and they have emulsion problems, I'm going to ask what the humidity level is. I don't know. Well, I don't know is guessing. That's a problem. Because now you don't know if your screens are dry all the way. Well, they feel dry, but so does a tomato until you cut into it. So does a watermelon, really, until you cut into it. And your screen stencil might feel dry to the touch, but if there's water molecules still in there, you can have some exposure problems. You can have some solvent resistance problems. You could lose detail, especially if you're using a diazo or a dual cure emulsion that you're adding a sensitizer to, because water will also block it from cross-linking in those areas. Dry screens are important. Remember, the goal is total cure on exposure, not how fast. This is to remind me it's lunchtime. No, this is the show, total cure. We all, as guys, Marshall is a great guy on a grill. He does it also. I've had it, and most everybody is. When you grill a hamburger, you have to flip it. Can you cook it without flipping it? Yes. What will happen is this. It will get all done on the top, and it takes longer and longer for that heat to get through all the way, and it stays soft on the bottom of it or the other side of it until you flip it. Same thing with pancakes. How do you know when to flip them? They start bubbling. If not, they're going to burn on the bottom, and it just will take forever to get to the top where the energy is. You want to make sure your UV light, your stencil is going all the way through. It's about total cure of it. Next slide, Marshall, please. So it's about proper exposure. So it's not about how fast. I actually don't like super, super fast emulsion. When somebody says, yeah, my exposure is only 3 seconds, incredible. That worries me. Because is it all the way through, or is it soft on the top? Just like that hamburger. So much energy right away, and especially on pure photopolymers, which have no sensitizer you have to add, it will actually get crusty at the bottom, and it doesn't penetrate all the way through. This is where LED lights come in. LEDs are great. I'm a fan of them, but we have to know sometimes you get the wrong stencil, and it doesn't get all the way to it. Stays a little soft on top. That's why if you're doing discharge or water base, you have to post expose. So if you're doing discharge or water base, dual cures are the way to go with a metal halide. Remembering the goal is the total cure of the stencil. There's no guessing on exposure times. It has to be measured. And the way these get measured are with an exposure calculator or a step scale, a 21 step from Stouffer, Murakami, Chromaline have them, no problem. And these tell exposure. Now there's a company that says you can download and print off your own exposure calculator. I'm going to come out and say that is 100% false. You are printing off a dot pattern, not a filtered film positive. That dot pattern changes, and everybody's printer is different on density. I hate those things. Don't print off an exposure calculator. Get a Stouffer step from Stouffer, from Chromaline or Murakami, whoever. And these things are, at the most, they cost $20. And these tell you if you're exposed correctly or not. We want, if in the screen on the light shows the filter film positive, put it with the dull side down, and you tape one end of it, and you put it in the light. And you expose it just like a film positive. And then when you develop it, you can see where it is on the right. You can see all the way from 21 down to 8 is open. 7 is covered like we want. It's called a hard 7. That's 100% totally exposed right there, a hard 7. Now, if you're using something like a direct-to-film, or I'm sorry, not direct, a direct-to-screen, and you don't need a vacuum on it, you can also get away with a hard 6. I still like a hard 7, but remember, it's about total cure of your stencil. If your test shows you're at a hard 8 or a hard 9, you're overexposed. Overexposed stencils just will have you start losing resolution and detail. They do not affect how easy they reclaim. A totally exposed stencil will reclaim easier.
Alan, something's going on.
What happened?
I don't know. You froze up and just said easier like 700 times in a row.
Am I back?
You're back with the sound, but not with your camera.
Hold on.
Which we don't really need. It's okay. There you go.
Okay. Yep. Don't know.
Minor technical difficulties, although it was funny.
Hey, that's what it is. So what was the last thing we heard, Marshall?
Right.
So, I remember on easier because I was doing the thing on it.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you overexpose your emulsion, your stencil, and it's a hard 8 or 9, you will be overexposed. Don't worry. That just means you might lose some detail. Adjust it back down. But remember, fully cured stencils and even overexposed stencils do not make it harder to reclaim. Properly exposed emulsions are easier to reclaim. Fully cured stencils are easier to reclaim. This is how emulsion is supposed to look when it's reclaimed well and exposed well. Put the stencil remover on and what I call powders off. It just powders right away. You don't have gum, you don't have strips, you don't have hard or weak or hard spots like this. Isn't that beautiful on the left? That is gummy. That is 100% underexposed emulsion right there. It's not the chemical fault. This is an emulsion problem. Now, it could be the chemical fault because your screen was underexposed. It wasn't fully cross-linked. That means what has happened is it was soft and a solvent hit it, like lacquer thinner or screen opener. Don't get me on screen opener. Check with me later. Hate it. Hate screen opener. Should not be in a textile shop. Email me later on it. Did I mention hate? Should never be in there. Because this is what it does to screens. Some stencils, it'll do it. Screen opener and hot solvents will do that even if they're fully exposed because they're not solvent resistant. They're not supposed to be. We print plastisol. No, there's no, we don't use solvents usually. Screen exposure, poorly cured stencils equal ugly reclaim. As a chemical guy, I can go into a shop and I can see some emulsion problems and I know they're having reclaiming issues. When you have that gunk in your washout booth and you think auto reclaim is the solution. No, you have made the problem even more because that gum you have, all that unexposed emulsion is now into that new $80,000 auto reclaim unit in the pumps, in the filters. Chewing gum is not good in pumps and it's not good in filters. Remember what we were told chewing gum as a kid? Don't swallow it. We were told, was anybody ever, Marshall, were you told it lasts 7 years? We were always told it lasts 7 years in your stomach. It doesn't, but still, don't swallow it. Chewing gum is not good in machines. You have that in your washout booth, you're going to have it on an auto reclaim machine. And it's not the machine's fault, and it's not the chemical's fault. Any questions on any of that?
Just type it in and we'll get to it. So keep
Yep.
going, Alan. We want to wrap up because we're nearing an hour.
Okay,
So-
got it. So a word on frames. Here's the thing on frames. How much control do you want of the uncontrollable? That's where it comes to. Screens are equipment, retentionable. They're the highest, most consistent tensions, able to retention and work hardens and stabilizes over time. You buy a quality stretch and glue, the mesh has to be monitored, the mesh has to be removed and restretched. Now, I'm a fan of controlling the uncontrollable. And so I love roller frames. They're the only way that can happen. But these are even more equipment. They cost more, and there is a process. And you have to buy into that. If not, you have a very expensive frame that it's still not doing, you're not getting the maximum benefit out of. Take control of this area. Screens are equipment. Get rid of your wood frames, go to aluminum if you're doing that, and make sure it's a quality aluminum frame. And you have to measure them when they come in. Plastisaws to be sheared. The better the tension, the easier the shear. The lower the off contact, the less squeegee pressure. Yes, less is more when it comes to squeegee. Better opacity, higher mesh counts, better ink yield. That's just money. Better ink lay down, smooth underbases, better registration, and faster print speeds, which are all about profit and production. And all because you've taken control of the tension in your screen, which are equipment. Here we are, Marshall.
Hey, we made it all the way through.
This is my contact information. That's the company I work for. You can email me at any time. Grab me on Facebook. You know what? I need more followers on Instagram. Help me out. You can always text me or call me. If you text me or call and leave a message, I will answer it. Please tell me who you are and your company name. Just don't say I heard you at a seminar. Oh my Lord, that doesn't help.
Hey, I get those too.
Yep.
Hey, I
But
was in your
please-
class. Okay.
Good. Which one? What year? Yes.
Yeah. All right. So photo credits.
I can't do this by myself. I get photos from everybody. These are the people from Blue Water, from Lotus to Saudi M&R, Easy Way Stretch, McDermott Autotype. Of course, Mr. Richard Greaves, who I will give him a plug. You need pictures, you need an article, contact Richard from Yolano. So, yeah.
So let's get some questions. If you guys want to type those in, that would be great. And we'll get Alan to answer them. So let me ask you this, Alan. I think a lot of people tend to discount the whole screen room as part of their process. And they're always focused on, I need a better white.
Yeah.
Right? I don't like this white. I want a better white. I need a white that's more opaque. Of course, there's always, different qualities of ink, but, my contention is that before you start looking at ink, you really need to look at your screen. Would you agree with that?
100%. You know what? Let's face it, screen rooms are not sexy. Presses and dryers, you can see the tangible. And I always tell shops when I'm there, when they have a good screen room, that person managing it and working it, they should be your best employee. Because when that cool print comes off and the printers are all happy, that screen room manager needs to go, you're welcome. Because all they're doing at that time is the job's easy. They're pretty much push play.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I don't see any questions. I'll give you one more moment. So while we're waiting for somebody to put a question in, so Alan, what do you think your your top go-to tip that to somebody to really revolutionize their screen room, what should they think? What's your go-to answer for that?
Keep it clean and measure it. Measure your tension. If, like I said at the beginning, if you learn nothing else, take control of your screen tension. Your screen tension will make you money, increase your profitability right away. But you have to buy into it and do it. If you don't do it, you're frustrated from word go. And I said it already.
Well, hey, that's great. And that's going to wrap us up. So thank you so much, Alan, for your time today. Thank everyone who joined us live. I know a lot of people signed up, and we'll be sending the stuff out. We'll also post this in the Shirt Lab Tribe circle area, and we'll also have this on my YouTube channel, so you can watch this later.
And Marshall,
if you guys have any questions, you can go, where's the thing? You can email Alan at ahow@easyway.com, and I'm sure he'll help you. So,
and Marshall, you and I do a podcast every Friday at noon Eastern.
Wait, hold on. We have a podcast? You never
Well,
told
it's
me
a video podcast, and you forget you and I meet every Friday at 12 noon Eastern for Q&A with Alan and Marshall.
Oh, that's right. We do have a show. We've only been
Yep.
doing it 160 something days in a row, weeks in a row, or something crazy.
We talk everything garment decorating, and man, we would love for you if you haven't tuned in. You can see all the past episodes. Go to the YouTube channel and look it up, and we'd love to see you tomorrow at noon Eastern.
Yep. All right, everyone. Well, hey, you guys take care, and we'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.